Cheers.
Cheers. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, 25 GOATQuest audience.
Oh, strong drink.
Is that that Diet Coke?
Yeah.
That'll turn you.
A little bite.
Nothing like mixing it with a little butcher's cut. We'll get to that before.
If we weren't driving afterwards, I would be mixing.
You would be mixing.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we just did our first hockey episode. You weren't part of it. Corey Elkins came in. That'll be releasing as we're broadcasting. This is going to be releasing. We had Corey Elkins, former LA King. Corey Elkins in. He talked to us about scoring a goal in the NHL and his long career in Europe after that. And it got me thinking because
Did he win the Stanley Cup? Because they won a bunch of them.
he did not.
He did not.
I played with Drew Doughty and some of those guys who were on the Cup team. But no, and then he went to Anaheim and then ended up in Europe for a long career. And it got me thinking. Your significant other, the only female to ever play in a major professional sport, Mano Rayom, little name drop. I was wondering, did she ever try to play in Europe afterwards?
No, she played for like 8 years.
Because I know she played in the Q.
No, she played like 20 years. She played in Quebec for a long time. And then after she tried out for the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think like 7 or 8 years she played in the minor leagues. And then they finally, in 2008, she started in like 1992. In 2008 was her first Olympics.
Oh.
In 2008. And I think she only played one Olympics, and they came in last second goal. They lost in overtime.
Got it.
She got a silver.
She's a native French speaker from Quebec. And
Yeah, she speaks English too.
Oh, I know she speaks English.
Barely. Not good English, but English.
Her son's playing in France now. Mm-hmm. I always wondered, why did France, with the connection to Quebec, why has their hockey not taken off like Scandinavia? Now Germany has strong hockey.
Surprisingly, the connection to Quebec, it is. They're both French, like a different dialect. Like you go and you speak Quebec French in France, they don't know what the fuck you're talking about. They have no idea.
The English accent for Quebec people is so thick sometimes you can't understand a word they're saying in English.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just like, when you go to Britain or you go to Wales or you go to somewhere that they say it's English and we're like that ain't English.
I don't know where you're going with that.
But, her son Dylan went there and he's playing in France and, they gave him a little salary and a place to live and a car and it's a great lifestyle. They love the lifestyle.
So that's a league that's on the way up. It's on the rise.
But there's a lot more leagues, a lot more hockey over there than you would think. I think there's like 3 leagues in France.
Wow.
So I don't know exactly.
But you can make a really good living. Like Corey explained.
Oh, yeah.
He was getting a better
the
salary.
best part is it's tax-free.
Oh,
if you're an American.
Okay.
Yeah. My buddy Mike
Unless you bring it in, right?
My
then
buddy
you got
Mike
expatriation.
Yeah, my buddy Mike Vellucci that coaches for the Penguins. But he said the best part of it when you brought that, I think he probably made $50, $60, $80,000, whatever they make. They don't make a ton of money. I'm sure some people make huge money, like ex-guys that were NHL All-Stars that go there and retire. But the nice thing is it's tax-free in the United States.
Well, Corey explained that his deal in the Czech Republic was much more lucrative than he would have got entry level in the NHL. Then his deal in Helsinki, Finland, was a great deal with a great league and a great program. But he said Sweden, the Swiss league, the KHL, obviously people can get some big contracts in Russia, but with what's going on with the Ukraine right now, that's a little weird.
The big no-no in Russia is let's say there's 10 teams in Russia. Like a couple of years ago, half quit paying the players. I'm done. We're done.
Yeah.
Quit paying them halfway through. And then players kept playing. Some of them did, and they quit paying them.
These fly-by-night leagues.
Yeah, well, it's in Russia.
And, good luck taking that to court.
Yeah. Where are you going to go?
Knock on Putin's door?
What are you going to do? Nothing?
Yeah, no. Yeah, we had Corey Elkins in. He gave us a little snapshot of hockey. We're going to do more of that in the future. We're going to have some hockey. We're going to have some basketball as the season progresses here. But right now, we're in the thick of it with the end of the professional football season. So when this episode drops, the professional football season will have ended. The Detroit Lions play the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday night. It's the game of the week. It's the biggest game. A 14-3 for the first time in NFL history will be a wild card team when that game is over. A fifth-seeded wild card team.
Crazy. Do we know who that fifth seed would play yet? I just hope it's not us. I hate to say that's the thing.
We've come
too.
too far to
well,
make
that's
this
the thing
happen,
too.
right?
I mean, if you have Philly down the road and you get to the game before the NFC, it could mean going to Philly.
Yeah, you don't want to have
You
to
don't
play
want to go to
Philly
Philly, and I know
somebody
and
else
I don't
on the
care
road.
if we're 15-0 on the road. Going to Philly in a playoff game, I did it, and it's very uncomfortable, to say the least.
It's batteries being hurled.
Yeah, batteries
If
being
there's
thrown
snow,
at you.
there's going to be rocks inside the
And
snowballs.
their vocabulary in Philly is completely different than any other NFL team.
By what standard?
I can't talk about it.
Oh,
I can't say it.
It's
I mean,
vulgar.
it's the most vile, nasty things that you can possibly say about someone's mother or daughter.
And that's
or
just the
sister.
middle-aged women saying
That's
it, right?
That's just the women. We haven't even got to the men yet. That's it. They're not even drunk.
The men just
They're not even
expose
drunk.
themselves.
Yeah, this is pre-drunk. This is pre-game.
Oh, Philly fan. Fly, Eagle, fly.
They are nuts.
So we got the Lions right now amidst the greatest offensive exposition that I have seen in my lifetime for this team, and maybe historic offensively. We'll see how the season ends.
Yeah.
People bring up, okay, well, points per game or yards per game and all the historical records of teams that had phenomenal offenses. But a lot of it has to do with just the game management during the season of whether or not you needed to keep your first string guys in the second half. The Lions have been pounding the daylights in the first half of the season out of teams. Sometimes they've been in scramble mode, but sometimes they've allowed Jared Goff to only have to throw the ball 15, 16 times in a game.
Obviously, Jared Goff is a key for our team. But if we can run the football, you don't know what's happening. It affects the linebackers and the DBs and the entire defense. When somebody's running the football down your throat, it's very difficult when play action comes up. It just is. Receivers get open. If you're not running the football, it just takes the pressure off the defense.
Yeah.
It really does.
When you can run the football and those linebackers have to stay home, they have to honor gaps.
And that's why it doesn't matter who we play. We can beat anybody if we're running the football. If we're not, we're going to have some problems because they're going to get to Jared Goff. And they haven't been getting to Jared Goff very rarely. I mean, they barely touch him.
Cater to your point even further, that's what happens when linebackers have to stay home and honor the run. The tight end gets open easier, which is usually quick release. The slot receivers in the middle of the field opens up.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden your hot routes aren't just 5-yard routes. A hot route up the seam can be a 25-yard gain for a tight end.
Yeah. And it affects everything too. I mean, even on DBs. So DBs may take a chance for a pick. But when you're running the football and they know that there's no linebacker help underneath, they play different. They don't take as many risks. It's getting a little too nitpicky. But the idea is everything's better when you're running that football because you know you can get 5 yards if you need it.
And there's so much balance. I mean, even without David Montgomery, who looks like he might make a return in the playoffs if the Lions can make a deep run here.
Well, I mean, we got a Pro Bowler. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs is first team. He's going to be first team All-Pro, too.
We got a Pro Bowl running back.
To your argument, would you rather have another Pro Bowl running back next to you and get 10 carries a game or get 20 to 25 carries a game? I know what you would pick.
I've said this from the beginning. And even when David Montgomery went down, I said I'm not worried about the run game because sometimes feeding the beast is the best solution for a running back who's in a groove. And Jahmyr Gibbs is in a groove.
Yeah.
He's playing much better football than he was early in the season. And he is doing what I've told you and anybody else that'll listen in the second half. When you've carried the ball 15, 16, 17 times, you start to understand and read things quicker. You're a step faster with the cut. You're bouncing when you should bounce.
No, truthfully, it's in any sport.
Yeah.
It's
called volume.
It's called getting warmed up.
Yeah.
Getting, assimilated to what's going on. Even in anything. Golf. I mean, lots of guys come out in golf tournaments and hit it OB on one or miss a putt. It's staying in the game and staying with the rhythm.
And you see it with Derrick Henry in Baltimore. You see it with Saquon Barkley in Philadelphia.
They don't have a whole lot of backups.
They get spelled once in a while, but
yeah.
it's not something that happens very often.
And our guys that have come in and spelled, like Craig Reynolds, they've played good.
Yeah.
They're not Montgomery, and they're not going to be. But are they adequate? Absolutely.
The question is going to be deep into the red zone. Inside the 10-yard line, Montgomery was great at pounding the ball inside the 5. Mm-hmm. As long as that piece of our offense, as long as Ben Johnson is creative enough to find Laporta, to find St. Brown, those little rub routes, not a pick, just a rub, right? Just enough to get somebody open on the goal line, because I don't think Jahmyr Gibbs is ready to be the thumper inside the tackles when you need 2 yards and all the bigs are in.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's not going to thump it like Montgomery did, but he's crafty. Even in goal line, they give him the ball, and he actually, I think he does a fair job for his size.
So speaking of thumping it, did you watch Cam Scatterbo and the Arizona State Sun Devils make a valiant comeback and have the game in their hands had it not been, in my opinion, stolen from them?
Well, I almost missed it. I watched the first 3 periods, and I didn't see anything, right? It was all in the fourth period, or third period, too. Was it third and fourth? Some of the third.
We do call them quarters in football.
Whatever.
You got caught in hockey.
I got a hockey gal, so I've been saying period. Yeah, we do call it. I only played football for forever. It was amazing. They had some bounces go their way, and
283 yards of total offense. He throws a touchdown pass. He scores 2 touchdowns on his own.
And then the call that we talked about earlier, the targeting call that didn't get called. And I actually don't think it's a foul, but if you're going to call targeting
if it's going to be a penalty,
if it's going to be a penalty and you're going to call it as much as you do, like you said, it was textbook targeting.
You couldn't, by definition.
Yeah,
and I don't want to hear about he made contact with his face mask, not the crown of the helmet. That's not the rule.
That has nothing.
That's
to do
not
with
the rule with the defenseless
Nothing
receiver.
to do with it.
If he would have been a running back running the ball, then that's a different story. But in this situation, he was a defenseless receiver. Any helmet to helmet contact, doesn't matter face mask or whatever, helmet to helmet contact even with his shoulder to the head or the neck on a defenseless receiver is targeting. It's a penalty. It would have put them at midfield. It would have put them over midfield. They would have needed a first down and a field goal.
No, they would have had to get to the 5-yard line to actually kick a field goal.
With
see their field
kicker.
goal kicker?
True enough. Their field goal kicker was not stellar.
Still, it would have changed the outcome of the game, probably.
They would at least had an opportunity to win the game in regulation.
Correct.
And to steal that from them after that comeback. And here's the thing that got me the most, Tom. They took the receiver out of the game. He was knocked out.
Yeah,
this wasn't a targeting where the other team isn't really penalized because the guy pops up and he's right back in the huddle. He got eliminated from the field of play by getting knocked out.
He was on his ass for like 3 or 4 minutes.
They had plenty of time to review it. So that means they got into a booth and the NCAA assholes or the CFP pissants got together and they said, do we really want Arizona State to move on? They got together and they said, are we willing to cheat and defy the rule book so abhorrently that we're going to come back from this TV timeout and say that something that everyone with 2 eyes and a brain will judge as targeting is not targeting? Are we ready to do that? Yes, because the money is so big with Texas playing against Ohio State or Oregon, if Oregon would have won, but it is Ohio State, who was a wagon in the Rose Bowl. That's the game they wanted. They wanted Texas in Dallas. Remember, the game is the Cotton Bowl. So for attendance money and for TV money, Texas in Dallas against Ohio State was the game that they had to have.
So that's what we really think. We really think that these. How else do you take it?
I mean, it's helmet to helmet on a defenseless receiver. Everybody could see it.
I don't know how else you take it. Doesn't matter if you think it's wrong or right. By rule, that was targeting.
100%.
Yeah, and I think targeting is wonderful. I used to target. That's what I did. I like targeting.
I'm with you.
I like targeting.
I'm with you. I'd like to see the penalty erased.
I would too.
But if you're going to keep it in the books.
But if there's one thing that I would keep about targeting is that when a receiver is defenseless coming across the middle because so many guys were getting knocked out.
100%.
Now, Like when they call
That's the one area.
they call targeting on a running back when he's getting out of bounds,
Or a quarterback scrambling who tries to slide at the very last
and
second.
the running back puts his head down and he sees the safety coming, and the safety stills helmet to helmet. If you wanted to call that not targeting, I'd love that.
Oh, or if you're Patrick Mahomes and you're just trying to win an Oscar as you get to the sideline and flop yourself into oblivion, I could see all of those targetings go away. But you're right, the defenseless receiver is, potentially life-threatening hits.
No argument. No argument there. I have no idea. I mean, how do you reconcile that? It was called, first of all.
Well, it wasn't called. It was reviewed for targeting. But
that's right.
But to your point,
there wasn't a flag thrown.
Right. But to your point, the official who's in the television booth with the announcers, they brought him in. What do you think? And he said, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. That's helmet-to-helmet contact on a defenseless receiver. Wouldn't surprise me if they come back and that's targeting.
Yeah.
So you've got the objective person in the booth who the television network, hired to review the situation, saying it's targeting, and of course it's not called. Now, what game does that give us? A hell of a football game, Ohio State and Texas. Would I've liked to see Scadaboo against Ohio State? He might have shot all. That might have been everything he had.
That might have been it. That was all
he's throwing up on the sideline.
He's throwing halfback passes. He's throwing a pass that's short. It was not a good pass.
We're getting an epic game in the Cotton Bowl.
Exactly.
We're getting the Texas Longhorns against the Ohio State Buckeyes. And if you didn't get a chance to see what the Buckeyes did to the Oregon Ducks in the first half, I'm telling you right now, that was pros doing professional things.
Yeah.
And they ran it up. Dan Lanning had no answers. Will Howard played the best football game that I've ever seen him play, going back to Kansas State, his whole career. That's the best football game that kid's played. And the Smith kid is unstoppable. He's uncoverable, period.
If they play like that, they're unbeatable. I don't care. Michigan at home, Michigan on the road, anybody that they played all year, Penn State. If they play like that, they're just too good. They've got too much talent.
Way too many weapons.
Yeah, it's way too many. And their defense played so good, too.
He had 3 open receivers on multiple plays in the first half. They showed the wide angle. He has 3 open receivers. It was take your pick football for Will Howard.
Yeah.
And then you got Travion Henderson and Judkins. I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches for Ryan Day. And I do like the fact that in the post-game press conference, Dan Lanning reminded everybody.
Poor Ryan Day. It's an embarrassment of riches, and they won the football game. I know what you're saying, though.
The Dan Lanning comment, just to throw just a little dart into the mix. We didn't have it today, just like they didn't have it against Michigan.
Yeah. It's the truth, though. We were talking about that. Everybody expects that just because Ohio State played great one day, they're supposed to play great the next week. Doesn't work that way.
Not always.
That's why you have coaching. That's why you have coaching that gets you prepared mentally for things that go wrong. They talk about bad things happening. What happens when there's a pick? What happens when there's an 80-yard touchdown on offense? You got to pick your teammates up.
And I will say that about Texas, right? I don't want to just shovel the dirt on Texas because of the bad call. They persevered. They found a way. Ewers did not have his best stuff. He was struggling to see it in the second half.
Not to jump back and forth, but look at our Lions. 14-2 team, right?
2 miracles.
Hold on. There's at least 7 of those games we could have lost that were a play away from losing, but we're a good
Which is the whole NFL.
But that's a whole NFL, but we're a good team now, and we found a way to win. That's all you got to do. It's all about the win. It doesn't matter anything else.
And I do have to say, Motor City Dan Campbell and his coaching staff, these last 2, the San Francisco win and the Green Bay win, miracles. What they had defensively to work with.
Yeah.
Hopefully those guys are coming back. They say Anzalone has a fighting chance to play this weekend. If they can put some pieces back together, then they could be dangerous.
You know what? It really impressed me just the last couple of weeks, how well our DBs play. Our DBs have played their ass off. And we always got our running game. I think those are the most important 2 parts that I can see is our DB play and them playing the run also, not just guarding the receivers. DB play and us running the football.
Yeah, Robertson has stepped up.
Oh, my, Robertson's played great against the run, and he's played great against the pass. He's played great.
There will end up being a 14-3 football team. It'll either be the Vikings or the Lions after this game on Sunday. Getting back to the college ranks.
Yeah.
Ohio State, Texas. The other side is Penn State, who also looked like an absolute wagon, albeit against the Boise State squad that came out of the group of 5, which a lot of people are going to look at that after that performance and say, maybe we don't give a bye week to the group of 5. I know group of 5 gets in. I mean, Boise State represented themselves, and they did have some tough calls against them as well.
Yeah, but did you see?
They got manhandled.
I think they lost a few D linemen that went to the transfer portal or something because the D linemen that they had playing, looks aren't everything. But to go against that Penn State offensive line.
Yeah, and that's where the group of 5 teams and these West Coast teams, that's where they always struggle. Right, they struggled in the trenches. Yeah. It's what when Shermer came over to take over the offense with Dion in Colorado, he told him, we got to get big up front. We got great skill players. You get skill players. You play against Big Ten teams. Yeah. You play against the big boys. You got to do it in the trenches.
Yeah.
And Penn State did it in the trenches. Aller looked great at quarterback. It's the first time I can say that. Yeah. I've always thought he was suspect.
I never liked him. I just still don't like him. Something about him.
He looked good in this. He's looked good in both of these ball games. SMU game, but it's SMU and Boise State. You still have to look at that and go, they're good football teams, but they weren't tested football teams.
Yeah.
That's going to be a big question mark. So they will play in the Orange Bowl in Miami, as you said, at Hard Rock Stadium. That'll be Penn State versus the winner of Notre Dame and Georgia. As we record this, that game is going to be played after we get done recording because that's the one game that was delayed because of the tragic terrorist attack, the truck driving through the crowd on Bourbon Street. I can't imagine how horrific that whole deal is. They're going to play it at 4 o'clock because they don't want it to be late at night under the lights and have to deal with seeing things at night. But that's the world we live in right now. Yeah. I mean, there's just a level of insanity here that doesn't make much sense to people.
No. I mean, I've got a couple of my buddies that are gigantic. Jimmy D, our big Notre Dame guy. But I think Notre Dame's going to run away with it. I just think they've got too much talent. They got a great running backs. The quarterback's playing good. I can't imagine Notre Dame losing.
Georgia's defense is outstanding.
Absolutely.
That's enough to keep them in the game. I'm telling you right now, for Georgia to get blown out of this game, even for Georgia to lose by 2 scores, this quarterback is going to have to completely put a dump in his own shorts, right? It's Gunnar Stockton starting in place of Carson Beck. He had the shoulder tear, then decided he's just going to go to the NFL. So Carson Beck is done. It's Gunnar Stockton. He's game. We saw him at the end of that last game in the Texas game. We saw him do enough to win, so he can manage the field.
Yeah.
And that Georgia defense is something else. So I'm looking at it and saying this is going to be a nip and tuck game. I almost have to look at it and say, who are the kickers on these two teams? This thing could come down to a field goal. I think it's going to be nip and tuck. I love Jeremiah Love. And obviously Riley Leonard is playing at a very high level. And Marcus Freeman is coach of the year for a reason. I love Notre Dame. I love the story. I think that they can pull it out, but I do think that it's going to come right down to the wire. We could see another overtime game today with Notre Dame and Georgia.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of parity, kind of like the NFL. But, you know, there are some 34-0 games, but most of these games, I mean, even the Arizona State game yesterday, I thought they were going to they should have got blown out.
They represented the Big 12.
They represented the Big 12, but all these games are 3-point games besides Ohio State. That was a 2-touchdown game. When you think it's going to be close, it turns out to be a blowout. And when you think it's going to be a blowout, it turns out to be close.
Big Ten looks great.
Yeah.
In this bowl season. Look what the University of Michigan did to
Michigan
Alabama.
Michigan beating Alabama. That's a huge win.
Sharon Moore. Let's give a little Sharon Moore finishes the year with wins over Ohio State and Alabama. That is big-time football. And he wins this game without Kenneth Grant, without Mason Graham, without Colston Loveland. I mean, he's without Edwards and Mullings. His third-string running back is now on people's draft list.
And he lost his quarterback, and the middle of the third quarter, I think.
He's playing his running option dual threat quarterback who's really not a dual threat. All he can do is run.
Yeah.
They find a way to pull it out playing great defense with their second string defense. A bit of an embarrassment for DeBoer and Alabama to be playing the second string Michigan Wolverines in a year where they were 7-5 and really physically get your ass kicked.
And they did have some good players that played. They had a lot of guys out in the transfer portal or going to the NFL draft too. I think it was like 20 people were out.
Well, it wasn't 20 starters, I can tell you that.
No, it wasn't 20 starters.
They had a lot of their starters on the field, and they got smashed.
Yeah.
When you look at the Big Ten across the board with Penn State and Ohio State still rolling it up, Oregon just going out last night, the USC pulled off a big victory. I mean, the new teams coming into the Big Ten, I think the Big Ten gets the best of it right now. I mean, they look like the toughest conference. I think the SEC had some frauds in there that we didn't expect. The ACC has been abysmal. They got to blow that thing up. I know it's the best basketball conference out there, and maybe not even that anymore. What do you do with ACC football? They're all bad.
I think that transfer portal is going to change a lot of teams. I just do. You get a new coach. You get North Carolina. You know why you get Bill Belichick? So you get people. I would think if I was from North Carolina, he's had to be paid a ton of money. So the only reason you'd have people that want to make the NFL, that's what they think, that my coach is going to teach me how to be an NFL football player, and I'm going to go to North Carolina.
What can the ACC do, though? Can they merge with the Big 12? Is there a world where they can do something to fortify? Because when you look at it,
what's it going to do if you're not a good football team by merging with anyone?
Well, you got to get better football teams. In the NIL era and the transfer portal era.
Yeah, what do kids care about?
I believe that the death knell for this was actually last year when Florida State did not make the playoff. When Florida State did not make the 4-team playoff, even though they had the better record, that told people in the portal, that told the kids that were looking at going, ACC is not where I want to go, because the ACC can't even get their undefeated champion into the playoff.
Yeah.
I think people looked at that and said, well, if they can't get Florida State into the playoff, then I'm sure as hell not. And you're seeing that's how fast it can happen in the portal in the NIL era. That's how fast it can happen. In a year and a half, Florida State is a terrible football program now. In a year, Mike Norvell, great coach, right, who had this great team.
Almost got fired.
Until his quarterback got hurt.
Yeah.
Almost got fired now.
Yeah.
His team's awful. And the whole conference, Clemson, are average football teams when they get on the big stage. I'm not talking about average football teams.
And Clemson came out and said that they're not doing the portal deal.
Dabo doesn't like it.
Dabo doesn't like it. He's not going to do it.
You got to figure something out, brother, because that conference is in an ugly state of affairs.
The rubber's going to meet the road, too. I mean, if you get to the point where you're always taking people from the transfer portal, how do you develop a quarterback? What are you going to do? So, Joe, I'm starting quarterback at Clemson. You're a very good quarterback, and you're probably going to go in the NFL, but you're not ready for the NFL yet. You need another year or two. I'm going to go to you, Dabo, and I'm going to say, I'd like to come to Clemson. Well, we already have a starter. Well, what do you mean? You want me? Well, what are you going to do with the starter? I don't know. It's a whole another set of shit.
Maybe the ACC becomes the minor leagues. Hey, go play for Georgia Tech for a year, and then you can transfer over here. That's how you get development. Go play in the ACC for a year. Figure out your scheme.
I guess it's options. It's options for a college football player, and I'm happy they're getting paid. I think they should have a cap on it, because I think that they're probably going to hit – somebody's getting $20 million next year.
Yeah, well,
somebody's getting $20 million.
We have, and we'll never know, right? I mean, this Ohio State roster with $20 million. Now Bryce Underwood comes in. Maybe he's getting 10 or 12 by himself.
He's getting 12.
It's going to be the most bizarre state of affairs to watch this thing go down. Guys jumping in, like you mentioned, the night before the game, going into the portal.
Well, Deion Sanders was on today.
Oh, and by the way, Colorado lost with the big insurance policies with Shedeur and Travis Hunter both playing.
Yeah.
BYU still came in and Retzloff beat them.
Yeah. But he was like, I have a question for you guys. A couple of my players were guaranteed $5 million, and they're not in the transfer portal. How's that happen?
Right.
How's that happen?
Yeah.
So what's happening is coaches are going out there, and they're throwing numbers around to players that aren't even in the transfer portal, trying to get them to get in.
Of course they are. And this is the evolution of a shitty, unguarded, no boundaries programming initiative that the NCAA has lost control of.
Yeah. Yeah, they got to do something.
When you look down the list here of what happens next in college football, you're talking about the $20 million player. Well, I'm looking at it right now and saying, what's stopping them from getting entire units? We've seen a coach leave and have 11, 12 guys go with them. What's stopping then Bill Belichick from saying, you know what? We've got a big donor here at North Carolina. I really like that whole defensive line at Clemson.
And if you one come, you all come, or none of you come.
I want the whole defensive line.
I guess that's how a coach could flip it.
Of course, it's how Cignetti just did it with Indiana. He took his best 11 from James Madison.
Yeah, from James Madison.
But James Madison is a pretty good lower-end Division I program.
No, not lower end. They won. They
won their
bowl
conference,
game.
but it's a lower-end conference.
Yeah, it is. But no, yeah, so you're going to go buy a D-line, buy a defense.
Yeah.
Right?
This is what we want to go.
Hey, Coach Belichick, I want to come play with you. Well, if you can bring both your receivers, your tight end, and your offensive line.
Yeah. And when you were being recruited in high school, hey, you can probably land here if you can. Now this is me. This is me going up to Michigan State.
Yeah,
right?
we didn't have players like you played with where I was from.
You could probably land here if Dwayne Carter comes to Michigan State.
The unblockable defensive lineman.
Well, that's his son.
Oh.
Dwayne Carter Jr. is the one that's playing for the Buffalo Bills right now. Dwayne Carter Sr., who I played with, ended up at Ohio State as a wide receiver.
Oh, okay.
Was hotly recruited at the time.
Okay.
But the way that this thing is evolving, you're going to see that. You're going to have, at some point, somebody's going to buy a unit. We're already seeing it happen when a coach leaves, how many players he's taking. Now a coach is going to buy a unit at some point.
Yeah.
I thought Herb Street said something really smart in the Ohio State game, just to regulate things, because people look at this $20 million, and you won't see me give Ryan Day and Ohio State a lot of props, but I'm going to give him one here, and Herb Street was spot on. Of the 11 defensive starters, 10 of them are fourth year or fifth year. It's just the one, Caleb Downs, that they got from Alabama. Now, he's a great one. He should win every award,
sure,
right? But it's just the one defensive player. Most of their deals that they made to bring people in were on the offensive side. It's the Wild West.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the Wild West. Remember that? I mean, the TCU started this with everybody making $45,000 on the whole team.
I mean, I hate to say this, but you're going to have a team like Ohio State that, like, it's coming. They're going to have to guarantee each defensive starter $2 million. Okay, yeah. Big deal. I got a donor that's worth $1 billion. He won't pop up $2 million for 11, 22 million is nothing. And guess what? They're not going to leave.
No.
Until somebody else says it's $4 million a guy. It's coming.
So how does this play out? So, and we talked about this off the air. Cam Ward plays the first half, and Miami's winning by 3, and he does not play. He breaks his record, and then he does not play in the second half, and they lose to Iowa State.
And the coach has to know that he's not going to play in the second half, and they don't let the gamblers. How does that work?
Well, he doesn't play in the second half. They end up losing the football game. I mean, and whether it was the insurance policy or this was something that was preset, we know that Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders had the big insurance policies to play in their bowl game. They got to figure out something to get the best football players on the field for these games. It's kind of an embarrassment to the player and to the television audience when the best product's not on the field.
Yeah, especially when it's halftime. I mean, it's not like he's hurt.
No.
Or he opted out. He did opt out, but he opted out without telling anyone. You can't do that. It's like hiding an injury. That's what that is.
Yeah.
It's hiding an injury. They're not going to let
you can't do in the pros, but you
not,
can in college.
You know what? They're going to. They have to change that. If you're out, you're out. If you're in, you're in. You can't play a half.
It's bad.
It just screws up everything.
It's bad.
From
I like
from
Cam Ward.
fantasy to gambling to.
I hope it doesn't hurt perceptions of him with NFL scouts, but it might. We'll see.
Nah.
No.
NFL is if you can play, baby, you can play. They don't care. I don't care if you're snorting coke. If you can play,
At some point, if you're getting arrested for your recreational drug use. When I look at Cam Ward and I look at Dylan Gabriel, right, who a lot of them say is too small, doesn't have the arm strength.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these guys have played 5, 6, 7 years, right? There's going to be an 8-year guy next year. When you look at all of these guys, and then you've got a guy like Lamar Jackson who came into the league at 20, 21 years old.
Mm-hmm.
There's huge disparities.
Yeah.
We were laughing about the Tuttle kid from Michigan. Fred Warner, who's a 7-year pro, was in high school with him. Yeah. He's a 7-year pro. This guy's still in college, right? Now, we had Chris Wenke do it where he played 5 or 6 years in minor league baseball, and he ends up being a 26, 27-year-old. It's not like it's never happened before. But when you look at the disparity now that pro coaches you're going to be able to go into a draft with this post-pandemic era right now, especially this draft. You could come out of this draft with your top 3 or 4 picks all being 24 or older.
That's what a weird, and they're going to look at that. Because you have a short football life. I don't care who you are. You'll have a rarity. You'll have a Tom Brady. Very rare. But when we're talking about linebackers and running backs, receivers, you get to your late 20s, stuff starts going.
Right. Shelf life.
Yeah. Can't jump like you used to. Can't run like you used to.
This is perishable fruit.
Yeah. I mean,
it spoils quickly.
Look at the guys that are 28, 29 years old. You get old quick. You just do. And that little half step that you were faster matters.
Oh, yeah.
Matters a lot.
It can be over very quickly for you.
Yep.
Especially in those specialty positions.
Yeah. Nice thing is you play 7 years of college football. You're probably a pretty good college football player. So now, at least, you got some money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the nice thing with the NIL.
You got to get that second contract in the NFL, though. When you're in the NFL, you got to get out of that first contract.
You do. And it's hard. Now you're going to be a 30-year-old in your second contract rather than a 26-year-old. They look at that differently, and they're going to pay you less.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a brave new world. Since we're on the pros, let's get into our GOAT conversation.
Okay.
Because we always do a list of the greatest of all time, and tying this back to the Lions, they're having an epic offensive season. We talked about Montgomery and Gibbs. Obviously, Jared Goff is having a mind-blowing statistical season, and he's really not even in the conversation with Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson for the MVP award. People are even throwing Joe Burrow in there over Jared Goff now with what the run that Burrow has been on. Do you know Burrow's thrown for over 325 yards in 8 consecutive games? It's never been done before. Never happened before with the run that he's on right now.
Yeah.
But the offensive skill set with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams,
Laporta,
the tool shed is just full of sharp objects that can cut you. And they are cutting through NFL defenses. San Francisco, they had a lot of players on the defensive side that got back and got healthy, and they still couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
Whether or not we can stop anybody is the question.
I think it's back to the run game. If we can run the football, we are going to have a great year. Are we going to win every game? No. Are we going to be out of any game?
Never.
That's one thing. We have not been out of one game.
No, we are not out of the game.
We're never out of one game. That's rare. Not one game.
The Bills had us down 3 scores, and we were in the game.
Yeah, and we were in the game.
We
and
were.
Remember, I do remember 2 years ago, I think we played at Baltimore, and they beat the shit out of us.
At their place.
That we were never in that game.
No.
And they shut down. You want to know why?
I think it was 28-0 in the first quarter.
They shut down our run. We couldn't run the football. If there's a team that we play, if our downfall will be if we play a team that somehow their defense can figure out how to stop our run.
Yeah, and that's difficult when you got so many weapons. And the Ravens, since you mentioned them, the Lions are not the best offensive team statistically right now in the NFL.
No, the Ravens are.
most yards per game.
Yeah.
They're the best scoring. I'm looking
They've
at
got Derrick Henry. They got Zay Flowers. They got two great tight ends, Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Their quarterback is somebody that I would never want to play against.
and it's not by a little. It's 14 yards per game. They're 14 yards per game better than us. And when you go to
That's kind of a little.
when you talk about how close the rest of them are,
You're right.
They're better than us. We have a better scoring average than they do. We're at 33.3 points per game. They're at 30.2. So we're scoring more points. But there have been teams that have scored 35, 36, 37, 38 points in a season. As I said in the open, this one feels different because the Lions just feel like they can do whatever they want. Whatever fits the game at the moment, they can manage the game to score at will whenever they need to.
Yeah. When I look at NFL defenses, I say to myself, so what's the best NFL defense right now? Well, it used to be Baltimore. I don't know. Because there's no defense with these rules that can stop an offensive team that has a hot quarterback.
I would have said it was the Steelers. The Steelers are getting beat lately. I mean, they can't figure it out on the offensive side of the ball.
They're giving up 40.
And they're giving up 40
35
to the Ravens.
Yeah, or to Jacksonville. They'll win 35-32. We'll win, but you gave 32 points to Texas or to the Texans.
Yeah. If I had to break it down, and I'm looking at it right now, the Buffalo Bills obviously came into Detroit and beat our second string defense.
Yep.
Let's just be blunt.
True.
That's our second string defense on the field.
But I'm not so sure our first string could stop Josh Allen.
I think in the right time, in the right moment, with the right game plan, without being beleaguered to that degree and losing guys during the game against them, I think that's a different football game when we've got even half of our defense. I am not scared of the Chiefs at all. I know that they could beat the Lions 100%. It wouldn't shock me, but I'm not scared of them. They're not going to do things. We're going to be in that game. We play the Chiefs, we're going to be in that football game. We'll have a chance to win.
Yeah.
They don't scare me. The Ravens are still the team, to your earlier point. That scare me.
Ravens scare me.
Lamar Jackson just broke Randall Cunningham's record. He is the all-time leader in quarterback rushing. He is the dual threat GOAT.
And the Eagles scare me. Those
you
running
don't want to go to
quarterbacks. No. I don't want to go to Philly. I don't want to play Philly.
I want to play Philly. I want to beat their ass, and then I want to beat the Chiefs' ass. I want it to be definitive. I want this to be one of the greatest teams of all time because they went and beat the greatest on the way.
Well, they're going to have to. If they're going to win a Super Bowl, they're going to have to. But
somebody else could beat Philly. You never know.
That's true. That's true. And they'd probably give us fits. So maybe we'd rather play Philly, like you said.
I want to play the best. I want this team to have all of its opportunities to get all the accolades. I think it's the best coached team in the NFL right now. You heard what Bosa said after the game from San Francisco.
Yeah.
That team looks like it's a fun team to play for.
Yeah.
They believe in their coach.
They do. They do. And he's got a lot of good things going.
What we're talking about from the GOAT perspective, and because all my picks were correct in the CFP, I'm putting on that's what you just heard rattle over the cage is the GOAT. I'm wearing the full GOAT chain here. I'm wearing the GOAT chain. We got the GOAT belt. We got the GOAT chain. We got the butcher's cut here. Detroit City Distillery. It's all arriving here for the GOAT list now. The greatest offenses of all time in the history of the NFL.
Okay.
I want to hear you kind of bring me up from the bottom half into Mount Rushmore.
I'm going to start with 1984 Miami Dolphins.
Ooh.
Dan Marino.
Super duper.
Super duper. Mark Clayton. They threw for over 5,000 yards back when they used to still run the football.
I think, aren't they the only team that threw for 400 a game?
I think so. And I guess their running back, I don't remember this guy back then, was named Tony Nathan, who posted 600 yards rushing and like they threw the ball in a running, their number one running back had more receiving yards than running yards.
Yeah, it was draw and short yardage.
Yeah.
That's it for the running game.
And just give it to Marino and let him fire it. I did play against Dan Marino one game, and the ball had a different sound. Had a like I can't explain it. It was way different than Scott Mitchell. Yeah. Like a way different sound, and he threw darts.
Yeah, tight.
You tight, and they hit you right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was really good.
The duels between Marino and Elway, who also had one of the great offenses with the Broncos. Broncos probably show up on the list twice. The Peyton Manning Broncos and the Elway Broncos are, in the top 10, 15 offenses of all time. But those matchups, when you had the icons, Marino and Elway, same thing with Jim Kelly and the K-Gun. I'm sure we'll talk about Kelly here, but those matchups were the marquee matchups.
I mean, just think back when DBs used to be able to rape receivers.
Yeah.
That's what it was back in the 80s and even the 90s. DBs had you couldn't use the stickum anymore, but they used to essentially tackle them inside of 5 yards. It was a different game.
Yeah.
I mean, now.
But I like it better. I
like the game better now.
I want to fight that battle with you. I liked it when you could play bump and run and be abusive in the 5-yard zone, because they would call the on-the-ball PI in that era. The on-the-ball PI on the pass play, the jump ball PI. You can't get a jump ball PI now.
Yeah.
Now if you hit them early, if you hit their hand,
Yeah.
the hand that's trying to catch the ball, these DBs are coming in early.
Yeah.
But you're right, you can't touch them within 5 yards. They've made it easier for receivers to get open, but the DBs get to come right through the catch now,
Yeah.
which is a little different. I don't know how that plays out in statistics and whether or not you can actually see that bear out, but we're having eye-popping numbers offensively, so it's certainly not hurting the game.
It's crazy. My number 9 team was the 1983 Washington Redskins. Joe Theismann threw for 3,700 yards. John Riggins. They obviously won a Super Bowl.
Riggins went 24 touchdowns on that team. Theismann had 29 TDs. Of the 3 Super Bowl teams, that's the best.
How did you know that?
Because I have that weird. Riggins was my favorite player. That was probably my favorite team. That was the Hogs.
Stealing my thunder.
It's the best offensive line in the history of football.
Yeah. Number 8, I've got the Patriots. Tom Brady team from the 2012, one of the earlier.
Yeah, the 07.
They had Danny Woodhead.
Danny Woodhead.
Yeah.
That's a great poll.
Stephen Ridley. Obviously, Randy Moss played on that team.
Well, I mean, if you run, just think about the Patriots, because, Anthony Frederick joined us and talked about plumbers and mechanics, right? They had Woodhead. They had Welker.
Yeah, Welker.
Who was a stud in several offenses. He was in that Broncos offense, too. They had Amendola.
Yeah.
They had Edelman.
A young Edelman, a rookie.
Deion Branch.
Yeah.
Right?
He played both ways.
There was a lot of tool makers in that shed. Brady made them great football players, right? Except Randy Moss.
Yeah.
Randy Moss is the special. Prayers to him as he fights this cancer battle. But Randy Moss, one of the greatest of all time. And he shows up on 2 of these, because you got to mention that if you're mentioning the Patriots, whether it's the 07 Patriots or one of the other teams, you got to mention the 98 Vikings too. Chris Carter, Randy Moss, a resurgent Randall Cunningham who goes for almost 3,000 yards passing, runs the ball all over the field, and Robert Smith.
Yeah, at running back.
Running back, who's seriously underrated 1,000-yard rusher.
Number 7, I've got 2011 New Orleans Saints with Drew Brees. They had Mark Ingram, Pierre Thomas, Darren Sproles. I mean, they had great running backs.
Sproles had 1,000 yards receiving that year.
Marcus Colston was the leading receiver on the team. They had Jimmy Graham at tight end. They won a Super Bowl.
They won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, they won a Super Bowl.
But between 06 and 13, between 2006 and 13, one of the most impressive statistics in the history of football, Drew Brees and that offense led the league in every relevance. This is during the time of Tom Brady. They led the league in every passing statistic there was. Sean Payton's offense, from 2006 to 2013, they led the league in every passing statistic that you could find.
Wow.
I mean, that was an offense.
Yeah, they're good. At number 6, I've got the 2011 Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers. How the mighty have fallen.
God, just give me the Brett Favre Packers. Don't give me the Rod.
I
I know statistically the Rodgers one is better with Jordy Nelson
But back when they had Ryan Grant and James Starks at running backs and Greg Jennings at receivers.
Jennings. Did he go to Western Michigan?
think
he's like a Western Michigan guy.
Yeah, Jermichael Finley at tight end, James Jones at wide receiver also.
Yeah.
So they're my number 6 team.
I'm sure you've got a couple more on your Mount Rushmore, but let me jump in here. My little feature here, because I love the Chargers from the Eric Coryell days. I want you to think about Eric Coryell. From 1978 to 1985, they led the league in offense 7 out of 8 seasons, 6 in a row and 7 out of 8 seasons. Coryell himself started at San Diego State. San Diego State at the time he got there was kind of like 1AA. It was like the small school, and then they moved to Division I. But he went 11-0 in his first year in Division I, okay, after they moved up. So they won 3 championships there at San Diego State, but think about who his coaches were at San Diego State when he moves to the Chargers. The coaching tree of offense begins with Don Coryell. His coaches were Joe Gibbs, who went and won 3 Super Bowls with the Redskins, Washington team. John Madden, who went and won Super Bowls and changed the game.
What did he coach? Do you even know?
He was the defensive coordinator.
Oh, okay.
It goes on to coach the Raiders. Ernie Zampese, who became the offensive guru of the Chargers later, but then also the Dallas Cowboys, who also gave birth to Norv Turner on that tree, and Mike Martz on that tree with Al Saunders. I mean, you go right down the line. Mike Martz and Norv Turner, Martz coaching for Vermeil with the greatest show on turf. I mean, greatest show on turf. How do you get better than Kurt Warner, who, by the way, took over that team when Trent Green got hurt? Trent Green was ready, if you remember, he was Pro Bowl the year before. He was ready to take that team off into the sunset and become one of the greatest quarterbacks. He gets hurt. Kurt Warner gets a chance from bagging groceries to step into that team, and he's got Holt, Bruce, Prohl, Azahir Hakim, and Marshall Faulk, by the way. That the greatest show on turf is one of the greatest offenses of all time. But that Eric Coryell team, Charlie Joyner, Kellen Winslow, Wes Chandler, John Jefferson, Chuck Muncie at running back. The tools on that team with 3 Pro Bowl offensive linemen, that's the model. Everybody else, Michael Irvin, Emmitt Smith.
That's the model you strive for. Yeah.
But that's when you look at what Ben Johnson has right now with the Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
They're modeling this, and it goes all the way back to Eric Coryell. You already talked about the Washington team. We didn't really talk about the K-Gun, Jim Kelly with Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed. He had 2 Pro Bowl offensive linemen, Hull and Wolford, and they had your boy at tight end, Pete Metzelaars, from Three Rivers, Michigan. Did you know Metzelaars was from Michigan?
No.
Oh, yeah. And he went to Wabash College.
Yeah, I knew he went to Wabash.
Division III. Yeah. How many guys are in the NFL, have been in the NFL? He also won a Super Bowl. Did you know he did win a Super Bowl, even though the Bills lost 4 Super Bowls?
Who did he win a Super Bowl with?
As a coach with the Colts.
Oh.
He won the Super Bowl in 06. But he went to Three Rivers, Wabash. I don't know how many D3 guys have ever made the NFL.
If you were a player and you were walking up to the line, and Pete was big. Pete was like 6'7", which is rare, and he was pretty thin. He's probably 6'7", 230, but it's not that thin, the 230-pound guy. But he was crafty. He had good feet and good hands. Like, really hard to explain if you don't play football. But like, what are good feet and good hands? And he had the ability to, like on a sweep, like strength-wise and speed-wise, he had no shot. None. No. But he would hook defensive ends. I don't know how he did it. He just had a knack.
Beat him to the spot.
He just had a knack for it. Yeah, he was just a crafty player.
I look at those teams that come off of that. I mean, obviously the Dallas Cowboys, Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin, Emmitt Smith, Daryl Johnston, and Jay Novacek. You mentioned the Saints were one of my favorites. I mentioned the greatest show on turf. But then you got Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning is really 2 of the greatest offenses, right? He's got the Colts offense with Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, also Ricky Prohl, who was on that team, Dallas Clark, Joseph Adai. That team was loaded. And then he goes to the Broncos. Mm-hmm. And with the Broncos, he's got Decker.
Demarius Thomas. Who's passed.
Welker.
Yeah, Welker.
Yeah, May Thomas, rest in peace.
Yep.
And we've talked many times about the running back situation in Denver. That year,
Oh, God, would they have 5 different guys?
4 guys.
Yeah, 4 different guys, and they all look the same.
Moreno, Hillman, Monty Ball, who everybody thought was going to be amazing from Wisconsin. C.J. Anderson, who was one of the 2 Andersons who were all pros at Denver, right? Mike Anderson came in after the fact, or maybe C.J. was
Yeah,
after.
I remember when they switched it out, and they both rushed
Clones.
for 150 yards a game. Yeah.
Clones. And then they had Vernon Davis at tight end the second time around with the Manning year. I mean, Peyton Manning orchestrating those 2 offenses, that's like poetry in motion, watching offensive football.
Yeah. No, he was amazing.
West Coast offense. Bill Walsh's San Francisco 49ers. Are you a Joe Montana 49ers guy or a Steve Young 49ers guy if you're judging the offenses? Because they're both on the top 10 list.
God, I liked them both. I mean, I'd have to probably go with Montana. But Steve Young, his ability to run and make plays out of nothing was probably something Montana didn't have. But if you've got a good enough vision and you see people open that other people don't see and you're able to make passes, you don't need to run. So
I think Montana had better compliments. He had Taylor and Rice. He also had Dwight Clark, which I think is probably a little bit better tight end. And he had the Thunder and Lightning backfield with Wendell Tyler and Roger Craig. I think that's the better.
I think it was a different time, too. You know, you were able to back in those times where the Pittsburgh Steelers were good for every year for 10 or 15 years. It was just different. It's hard to compare. But they were close. I mean, they were only a year apart. But I like them both.
How about the Raiders offense with Berline? Do you realize that Marcus Allen during that season had to play some fullback because they had Bo Jackson? You imagine having Marcus Allen and Bo Jackson in the same backfield? I mean, you talk about historic football all around you.
I can't remember the exact story Spielman told me, but when we were talking about big running backs, blah, 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 and he would say all the time there was nothing like Bo Jackson. Nothing.
Too big, too
fast. Big, too fast,
obscene.
Too strong. Yeah, run you over and go for, 60 yards.
So we can't leave the best offenses without talking about the current one, which is the Kansas City Chiefs. KC and the Sunshine Band, led by Mahomes and Kelsey. Kelsey's going to go down as the greatest tight end in history. Mahomes is the only guy to go 5,050. Tyreek Hill was on the team in 2000. Mm-hmm. I'm sure I don't want to steal your thunder. You have notes on 2018? Is that your?
No, you're not stealing any thunder. That's about exactly what I was going to say. But they had Tyreek Hill, and Mahomes is kind of in the same realm of Josh Allen for me. It matters who you have, but it almost doesn't matter. You're not going to. It's so difficult to beat those teams. I don't care if their defense is out either. If they do what they have to do to win, and that's a weird thing that one person can have that type of power. Do I think Jared Goff can do it? No.
Not yet?
No, not if we don't
by himself.
If we don't have a running, okay, if Patrick Mahomes doesn't have a running game, don't matter.
He figures out another way.
He figures it out. Jared Goff's not that kind of player. He's a very good quarterback, don't get me wrong. But he's not Patrick Mahomes, and he's not
Josh Allen.
Josh Allen. He's not able to do that. That's okay. That's wonderful.
And Josh Allen hasn't proved that he can do it on the biggest stage yet. That's where Mahomes is so impressive.
Well, neither is.
Doesn't matter the stage.
Neither has from Baltimore
Lamar Jackson.
Neither is Lamar Jackson.
Right.
I mean, you want to talk
That's
about you want to talk about the choker. He gets to the NFC Championship or the game before it, and he doesn't play well.
Yeah, that's what's so impressive about Patrick Mahomes. And I do a lot of hating, but I'm only hating on the officials. I'm not hating on Patrick Mahomes. Yes, he does some acting, but hey, as a basketball player in my very short career I was great at taking charges. I loved acting and flopping, and that's part of the game. If you can do it well, I mean, he's just using all of his advantages. It's not a knock on Mahomes. Mahomes is doing something. We are amidst one of the greatest runs in the history of football, maybe in the history of sports. And I think your point, which can't be stressed enough, is that we really haven't seen a guy other than Brady, right, which is the pinnacle of conversations about GOAT football players, that finds a way no matter what the circumstances or conditions. And maybe that's Andy Reid, but it's certainly both of them.
Yeah. You know where I'm at on coaching. I mean, coaching matters. Don't get me wrong, but it's way overrated, in my opinion. I just think, the kid's got it. He's just got it. Whatever that it is, Josh Allen's got it. Like Tom Brady. Should Tom Brady have started at Michigan? Hell yes. Maybe not. But maybe not. I remember when they had that baseball player from Brighton that was split. What was his name? That was
Drew Henson.
Drew Henson. That was splitting times with him. I wasn't saying to myself, "Oh my God, you're not playing Tom Brady," because that Drew Henson was good.
Yeah.
So
Well, you think about Aaron Hernandez, Rob Gronkowski, the great tight ends that he had. To me, that is a strangely deciding factor in a lot of these. When I looked at the Saints, I was kind of blown away. All those great Saints teams that I mentioned between 2006 and 2013 with Sean Payton. Joe Horn, when he was on the team, they didn't win the championship. They didn't win the Super Bowl, right? It was Colston was the leading receiver that year. They didn't have Jimmy Graham when they won the Super Bowl. They won the Super Bowl with Jeremy Shockey and Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell was the blocking tight end. Shockey was the receiving tight end on that team.
I didn't know Dan Campbell won a Super Bowl.
He won a Super Bowl with the Saints.
Oh,
Darren Sproles, 1,000-yard receiver out of the backfield. I mean, that tight end quarterback combination that Kelsey and Mahomes have, all these great offenses have had it. Kellen Winslow, we talked about with Coryell. Dwight Clark with the 49ers. Dallas had Jay Novacek. They've all had a really good safety net that they could throw to in big situations. And I think that's Laporta for Jared Goff.
I think so. Listen, I want the Lions to win a Super Bowl. Don't get me wrong. But so many things have got to go right. So many people have got to stay healthy. And it's so hard just to get there. Maybe it's going to be next year. I know.
Stop it.
I know.
You son of a bitch.
It's not a jinx. You and your jinxes. I mean, it's really not a jinx. It's just you got to get lucky at the right time. And hopefully it's us this year.
The one thing that has to happen to make it much more probable is on Sunday, which will have already happened when this drops, the Minnesota Vikings need to have a Viking funeral. The Lions are coming in all black. They're wearing blackout uniforms for Sunday Night Football. We have got to get that victory first in order to secure that home field advantage and get healthy for a week. We had the earliest bye week in the season. We've been playing for like a dozen weeks in a row.
Yeah.
We got to have a week off to get
and we
healthy.
do have some guys that really need that week to come back. We got Anzalone coming back. I mean, I saw Hutch walking the other day. Did you see him walking? Yeah. I don't think he'll be back, even if we made the Super Bowl. And I think it'd be a good thing. We need him for the next 7 or 8 years.
All right, so Mount Rushmore, who is it? Give me your top offenses of all time. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Number 1 is the 2007 New England Patriots.
That lost to the Giants.
Yep, with Randy Moss and Dante Stallworth.
So you've got a non-Super Bowl team as your number 1.
That's who I've got as the number 1 team.
Next.
I think we've already talked about 2018 Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill. We've talked about them. Number 3 is the Denver Broncos, 2013 with Peyton Manning. We talked about them, Demaryius Thomas. And then number 4, I've got the 1999 St. Louis Rams.
I'm going to go almost the opposite direction there, but I'm going to go Air Coryell. Take your pick. 82, I think, was the year that they blew it out of the water with the most yards and still, I think, have the most passing yards per game for any team ever. My number 3 is the Washington 83 team, best offensive line ever with the Hogs and Riggins and Art Monk and Charlie Brown. My number 2 is the Kansas City Chiefs of 2018, and my number 1 is the greatest show on turf. I've still never seen anything as lethal, as scary as Kurt Warner and Mike Martz, the Wizard, orchestrating that offense up and down the field with all those weapons, and the key ingredient being Marshall Faulk.
Yeah.
At any minute, Marshall Faulk
was gone.
could be untouchable
Yeah.
to the end zone.
Yeah, he was. He was pretty amazing. I mean, there are a few guys that are as fast as him. Jameer Gibbs.
Oh, yeah.
Jameer Gibbs.
He's as
was
explosive.
Probably is faster, but is he
as agile left and right?
No.
Probably not.
No, but he's good.
Yeah.
He's good.
So that's what we've got. That's your top 4. That's the best offenses in the history of football, the greatest of all time. Once again, this has been a mediocrely presented but expertly produced, Johnny, podcast episode of Goat Quest. I want to thank you. Check us out on Spotify, on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, all the platforms. Wherever you're looking, we'll be there.
Follow us, like us.
Like us, follow us.
Go Lions.
Be the GOAT at whatever it is that you're doing today.